You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel.
My best friend in Sunday school was a robot named BOXY, by Demanda, performed by Otis Jiry. In 1975, I was 4 years old. I lived in Bolingbrook, Illinois, in a small blue house. My parents were still together. I had an older brother and sister. I had a cat named Martha, and at Sunday school I had just one friend, BOXY, the Bible robot. I was a shy little boy. I spent most of my time during the week in the house with my mom and Martha. I read dinosaur books and colored. When I ventured outside, I stuck to my front and backyard. My parents always said I was the one kid they never worried about too much about watching. I didn't wander. When Mom and Dad went to the grown-up services at church on Sunday mornings, they first dropped me off into the care of either Miss Rona or Mr. Bobby, who were both Sunday school teachers, but never worked together. Looking back, I want to say that they were in their early 20s, but it was hard to be sure. Mr. Bobby was the nice one. His room had the best toys and the best coloring books. He played guitar and sang with us. He told stories with biblical heroes like Daniel in the lion's den, Noah's Ark, and Joseph and the coat of many colors. Miss Rona, on the other hand, was to be obeyed. She taught us about sin. She taught us about punishment. Her stories were scary. The walls of Jericho, the Tower of Babel, Cain and Abel, to name a few. She made bad kids stand in the corner, noses against the wall. She led kids by the ear who weren't quick enough to listen. She gave swats to impertinent behinds. And she frowned, like all the time, even when BOXY the Bible robot taught class with her. Especially then. The only time I ever saw her smile was when she talked with parents. But whenever BOXY was there, we were safe. She left our ears and behinds alone. She sat at a desk in the corner and was quiet, leaving things to the robot. It never occurred to me back then that I never saw Mr. Bobby and BOXY in the same place at the same time. BOXY was made out of shining steel. His square body gleamed bright red, his arms and legs bright blue. His feet, also square, were glittering silver, as were his head and his hands. His eyes were reflective black glass. When he walked, we heard gears grind and shift from the inside, accompanied by very robotic bleeps and bloops. There was an on-off switch with a small blue light bulb on his belt, and it was always in the on position. He never spoke, but when he was in the room, played music, and the kids sang the songs Mr. Bobby had taught us, all while BOXY the Bible robot conducted. And then he would sit. He'd invite kids to sit in his lap, and we would read hymn stories from the little Bible picture books while he held us around the shoulders. He nodded, most appreciatively, as we read to him. I was very proud to be able to read these books to him at the age of 4. Monday through Friday, when Mom took me to the playground and the sandbox, I imagined that BOXY played with me. If I was indoors while my older brother and sister were still at school, I colored while BOXY sat next to me. I talked to him, and even though Mom only called my name to lunch and not his, we both went together. There came a time, I can't say how long, since I first met him, that BOXY didn't come to Sunday school as often. Miss Rona never spoke about it, and we didn't dare ask her, but Mr. Bobby told us once, a bit sharply, that he was being repaired, and things would be back to normal soon. But they never were. I couldn't see him as clearly as I used to when he played next to me in the sandbox anymore. Sometimes, while coloring, I'd turn to look for him, and he would be suddenly gone. Eventually, I only saw him at church, and that happened even less frequently as time went on. I'd held on to Mr. Bobby's promise, waiting for it to come true. In the end, that didn't work out either. When Mr. Bobby stopped teaching Sunday school altogether, I was very sad. Dad told me not to talk about it, not to ask nosy questions, but Mom said Mr. Bobby had moved. The one part about Sunday school that did not change was Miss Rona, only now we were left in her care every week. At first, after Mr. Bobby had left, she tried being nice for a while. It didn't last, and by the time I'd turned 5 years old, she was worse than ever. This wasn't as bad for me as it was for some kids. I was quiet and kept mostly to myself, exactly the kind of kid Miss Rona generally favored. I'd only gotten my ear grabbed twice in all the time I had known her, and she'd never swatted me. But I saw how she treated the others, especially Sergio. Sergio was one of those kids who couldn't have been made to sit still if you held a gun to his head, and he never learned. It wasn't so far out of bounds back then for a Sunday school teacher to use physical discipline on children. The world was different in 1975. She got to slapping him on the back of his head. She cornered him behind makeshift cardboard walls, hiding him from the other children. She put tape on his mouth and told him to leave it there. But nothing Miss Rona ever did made any difference. And one day, after dragging him into the cardboard corner again, she made him cry. This was extremely troubling to me, as I'd never seen him cry before. I'd cried both times at the ear-draggings I'd received, but not Sergio. Never Sergio. He resisted her. He yelled at her, screaming the word no, over and over again. He dropped to the floor and drew into himself like a turtle, and now that he had started crying, he refused to stop. I felt so bad for him. I wanted to cry too. Maybe I even did a little. Miss Rona's eyes found me, and she sighed. Okay, Lucas, go to the closet, get him a toy or something. I wasn't surprised or bothered by this. I got called on for help, in little ways, all the time. Putting down chairs, passing out finger paints, collecting activity sheets. I was one of the go-to guys, both for Miss Rona and once upon a time for Mr. Bobby. But this time, just this once, I did something really, really stupid. I left the room. Sergio's favorite toys were a red Tonka fire truck and a yellow Tonka dumpster truck. We hadn't seen either in weeks. They were in the Sunday school classroom 2 doors down from Miss Rona's. They were in Mr. Bobby's old room. If I'd been a little older, I might have justified my actions by telling myself I wasn't disobeying Miss Rona. There was a closet in that room, too, after all, and the trucks were probably both in it. But being 5, I had far more black-and-white ideas about right and wrong than that. I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing this. I remember making sure she wasn't looking when I ducked out of the door. No one told on me. I'm sure some of the other kids saw me leave, but they didn't say anything, at least not at first. Maybe they thought I was going to get another adult to help with Sergio. I don't know. All I wanted to do was get Sergio what I thought would make him happy again. It was so unlike me. I wasn't a wanderer. I shut myself in the empty classroom and reached up for the light switch. I hurried to the closet and yanked it open. At first, all I saw were boxes, taped up and labeled by hand. The words were too big for me to read. I sat down and harumphed in frustration. But then, looking up, I saw it. There was a shadow on a shelf in the back. It was familiar. I had to jump up to reach the bottom of the string switch for the light bulb, but I got it on the second try. There, deep in the closet beyond the stacked boxes, was BOXY the Bible robot himself. He was sitting straight up, back against the wall, legs dangling over the end of the shelf, bent at the knees. At first, I was dumbstruck. I just stood there. But then I went in. I had to crawl over the packed-up toys to get to him. I said his name. He didn't answer. I reached him. I tried to help him down, but instead he spilled over me in a heap. I yelped, certain I was about to be crushed. But it was like no impact at all. It was like he was hollow inside. I sat him up again, this time at my level. I tried to crawl into his lap, but his legs bent. I didn't want to hurt him. I found the on-off switch. I turned it on. I spoke to him. I asked him to wake up. He never answered me. And there, on the shelf next to him, I saw a small tape recorder with a cassette sticking out of the open plastic reel well. And there, at the corner of his chest, the crimson steel of his body casing was peeling. It was tinfoil. The paint was fading from it. Underneath it, only cardboard. His eyes were cheap sunglass lenses. His feet were shoeboxes. His arms and legs were plastic tubing. It was held together by packing tape. And now I was crying, loudly. I shook him. The box of his head wobbled on the black tubing of his neck. "Wake up!" I screamed at him. "Wake up, please!" A hand at my ear, gripping hard, I squealed in pain and surprise. But of course I knew who it was. "Little bastard," Miss Rona growled at me. "Disobedient, sneaky, little sinful shit." "He's broken," I wailed at her. "Miss Rona, he's dead. Somebody has to fix him." Then there was only pain as she turned me over and swatted my ass. Once, twice, 3 times. "Be quiet," she said. "What the hell are you even talking about?" And then she stopped. She saw. She realized. Her voice softened, and she said, "He's not dead, Lucas. He's perfectly fine, and he's as real as you are. Here, I'll prove it." She took BOXY apart piece by piece. Then she said, "All he needs is a person. All he needs is you, Lucas." She put my arms in the plastic tubing, even though they were way too small to fill them. She yanked them in half to make my arms fit. She did the same to my legs, sitting me on my sore and battered behind. She wrapped the biggest box, the red tinfoil, about my body, which covered me from neck to ankles. She put my feet in the shoeboxes, my hand in the oversized gloves. "You see, Lucas, BOXY lives. Are you happy now?" I didn't answer. I understood. BOXY was fake. He'd been fake the whole time. I couldn't stop crying. "But when little robots don't work like they're supposed to," she went on, "when they wander off places they should not go, they have to be fixed, just like you said." She turned off the light. "Or they have to be put away, Lucas, until they learn their lesson." Then she took me apart. She started with my hands and feet. I saw them come off, thin silhouettes. There was no blood, no pain. They came off as though they had been screwed on the whole time, my whole life. And she put me away. She placed my hands in one part of the closet, my feet in another, telling me that the grown-up services still had an hour and a half to go. She unscrewed my arms and legs, tossing them in opposite corners, and explaining the service was extra long because it was Communion Sunday. She twisted my screaming head around in circles several times, detaching it from the glittering crimson body casing as she scolded me for taking her from the other children. "They're unattended. Not only have you been bad, but you're making me bad." She placed my head on the back shelf and wagged her finger at it. "It isn't fair," she said. "I have to work twice as hard now that Mr. Bobby's gone. Why are you doing this to me?" She stared at the floor, seething. "When the big boys misbehave," she went on, "they get locked up, forgotten about. Did you want that to happen to you?" she asked. She faced me, a shadow. We were alone. I don't know for how long. "Think about it," she said, shutting the closet door and locking it. "Think about it for half an hour, little monster. Pray on it until I come back for you." And she left. For half an hour, I was only my head and I was in the dark. My eyes might have adjusted to the dark. It was possible, I suppose, even behind the darkened glass of my robot eyes. Or I might have seen things as my brain suggested them to me. But my eyes darted down and back straight and to the left and to the right until I located all my other parts. My ears heard my chest breathing 2.5 feet down on the floor, even as the heat of my breath steamed the inside of my robot head. I didn't know how to pray except for little lunch and supper blessings and my bedtime prayer. None of those seemed right, but I had heard Pastor Randolph pray, and also my mom and dad. They asked for things and said they were sorry for things. "I'm sorry, God," I said, and after that, "Help me, God." For half an hour I said those two things, only those two things, over and over and over again. And then the closet door opened. Miss Rona put me back together in the dark before pulling the light switch. When it came on and she gently peeled away my robot coverings, my eyes hurt. She cupped my cheek in a gentle hand. I thought she might slap me, but she never did. "Have you learned your lesson?" she asked me softly. "Are you going to be good now? Will you do as you're told and all those things from this moment forward?" I nodded my head. She kissed the top of it. "Good," she said. "Then you can start by keeping this little incident between us. No one is to know but you and me and God. You don't want your parents to punish you for being bad in Sunday school, do you?" I shook my head no. "You don't want to go to hell, do you?" I shook my head no. I started crying again. The thought was terrifying. I hadn't considered that. "Be good," she said, "and maybe you can even forget this after a while. No harm done, right?" I didn't understand, but I knew I was supposed to say yes, so I said it. "Jesus loves you, Lucas. Remember that, okay?" And he does, you know? As for BOXY, the Bible robot, I never saw him again. Why did she keep him there all that time? Why did they? I'll never know. I was very angry at that old deception so early in my life. I had nightmares about it, but I'm over that now. I never had any other make-believe friends. In time, I made real friends. By the time I was 8, I was something close to normal. But I never told anyone about what happened that Communion Sunday. I've been afraid to, I guess. But I'm glad BOXY was there for me, for the time that he was real to me. He was my playmate and my best friend. He helped me find Jesus, and Jesus loves me. Jesus loves us all, just like the old song says, and that was a good thing to know when I was 5. Because Miss Rona, I'm pretty sure, did not.